Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming and for joining us today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to our event where we are launching our report, I Need to Be Free, what it means to be queer women in today's Iraq, which provides a snapshot of life's realities of 16 LBTQ women in different regions of Iraq. Today, we will reveal the discrimination and the violence based on sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression that are widespread in Iraq, with little space for public support for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer LGBTQ people. Women who are lesbian, bisexual, transgender, or queer are especially at risk of persecution in public and private spheres and are often forced to remain invisible. IraQueer and OutRight Action International are pleased to release this new report today. I'm Naziha Saeed, Arabic Media Officer at OutRight Action International, and I welcome Maria Shoden, Acting Executive Director at OutRight Action International, to give her opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Naziha, and welcome everyone who's attending today. I see a bunch of familiar names and some new ones, so really great to have you here. OutRight has been fighting for the human rights of LGBTQ people globally since we were founded in 1990. And of course, during that time, we've seen tremendous progress in advancing human rights and equality around the world, but we all know that there is a lot more to be done really everywhere, and in some places, even more. The way, if you're not familiar with OutRight at all, I'll say a couple of things about the way we work. We basically talk about our work as having three pillars. And the first one is research. And you all know that already because you're here today when we're presenting a new report. The research and data collection is crucial in everything that we do, because if you don't have the data to back up the claims that the human rights of LGBTIQ people are being violated, if you don't have that data, it's very difficult to convince decision makers that something needs to change, even if we know it because we hear it directly from our communities. That leads me to the second point, which is advocacy. Advocacy is the way to change the world for us. We convince people in power that they have to make changes in laws and policies so that rights of LGBTIQ people can be respected. And it goes beyond law and policy. Of course, it is important to change how our communities are viewed in societies more broadly. The third pillar is resourcing, and that includes making grants to groups so that they can keep the fight going, but it also means training activists, bringing people together, strengthening networks, making sure people have access to decision makers. All of that as part of what we call resourcing. These are the three ways that we conduct our work. And I think any sort of event happening this week can't really happen without saying something about what's happening in Ukraine right now and Russia's aggression to Ukraine. We know from a lot of our research that when there is a crisis, LGBTIQ people often fare worse than other people. And I mean, in the case of Ukraine, as people are trying to get to safety, maybe fleeing to a neighboring country or inside Ukraine, of course, for a lot of the LGBTQ population, going to regular shelters is not going to be an option. If you're a trans woman, you're not necessarily going to be welcome, or you face a high risk of harassment or violence. This is one of the reasons that OutRight started a fundraiser for Ukraine, which actually to date we're over $150,000 raised in less than a week. And as of this morning, I want to say that the average contribution to the fund was $62. We have people donating $5, $25, $100, really from over 2,000 people globally. So I think it's for many of us who are watching and reading the news, it is one way that people feel like, okay, I can't stop this war from happening, but there is a little something that I can do. And we're trying to provide that platform. And then, of course, fund groups inside Ukraine and outside Ukraine who are helping people who are fleeing. So coming back to the report that we're launching today, documenting the lives of LGBTIQ people is fundamental in our approach. Because if we don't explain what is happening in people's lives and what the obstacles that they're facing are, we cannot convince the world that it needs to change. And important for us is to ensure that we also talk to the people who are maybe more forgotten than others. And in many situations, LGBTQ women are part of that group. And that's why it's important that we're doing this report specifically and highlighting this. This is the work of many people, and I love that we've been able to work with Amir and with IraQueer on this project because we've worked together for many years, and it's always a pleasure and really a collaborative effort. And I also just want to mention the government of Canada, who has provided support to make this research possible for us to do. We really appreciate that. And with that, I am just going to hand over back to you, Nazia, to take us through today's program. Thank you so much to everyone for being here.
Thank you, Maria. The report seeks to identify current concerns, risks, and needs of LGBTQ women in Iraq today, and to assess the extent to which current political movement, as well as humanitarian and development efforts, are meeting their needs. We welcome now Amir Ashur, board member of IraQueer, to speak about this operation.
Thank you, Nazia. It's a pleasure to be with you all. I also see a lot of familiar names that I haven't spoken to in many months, so it's great to be back and doing this together. I started IraQueer actually in 2 days. It will be 7 years since we launched the organization, and we're grateful to be able to continue doing the work that we're doing through partners that we have been working with for many years, and to have the trust that we have from LGBT plus people in Iraq. I personally am very grateful to the team that's leading now, since I left the organization a few months ago, and all the hard work that they're doing. In an ideal world, one of my colleagues who are currently at the organization would be speaking today, and ideally one of my queer women colleagues would be speaking. But sadly, as you will see shortly, as we have a message from a queer woman who participated in the research, it's not really possible to have people reveal their identities without having to pay some kind of price for that. I think this report really is a huge milestone for the queer movement in Iraq. One of the first reports that I was engaged in was a report that I was doing when I was working at OutRight. And I remember at the time we interviewed 5 people for the whole report. The whole report was about 5 people. It was so difficult to find LGBT plus people anywhere in the country, especially people who were willing to speak about their stories. Today, you know, even though we've been doing a lot of work over the past decade or so, one of the voices, as Maria mentioned, that has been not as visible in the movement has been the voices of queer women. So today's report is really a huge milestone for the movement in Iraq. LGBT plus people in Iraq in general face a lot of violence. There are a lot of documented killing campaigns targeting LGBT plus people, at least in the last 15 to 20 years, that different international and Iraqi organizations have been able to document. One of the groups that have always been probably one of the most invisible, but also one of the groups that continuously faces violence has been, for example, trans women, especially trans women who undergo hormonal treatment and start showing some kind of changes physically that don't normally align with the sex that they're assigned on their IDs. Those women are constantly stopped by checkpoints in Iraq, and a lot of times are harassed by police members, and in many times even raped and killed. And so far, not even one person has been held accountable for these crimes. We are in possession of many videos where queer women are being forced to undress and to be humiliated, basically, by police forces who question their identities, who question their ethics and their existence, basically. We're lucky to actually have someone who is from the community who actually contributed to this report. Naziha, I'm not sure if you want to take us to that, and then we go back to the rest of the report and talk about the substance of it.
Sure. Thank you, Amir, for your remarks. The findings of this report offer insight as well into how international agencies and the government of Iraq must be more inclusive in their efforts to ensure that the dignity and human rights of LBTQ women are protected. We will listen to Naira, one of the women participated in the research. Her identity will remain anonymous for security reasons. We can't hear Yvonne.
مرحبا جميعا، أنا إحدى النساء اللواتي يشاركن في الدراسة، لكني أخفي صورتي وصوتي لأسباب أمنية. أريد التحدث عن حياة النساء الكويريات، لكن فكرت أن أعطيكم لمحة عن حياتي كمثال على هذه الحياة وعلى حياة شريحة كبيرة بشكل مختصر. اكتشفت ميولي الجنسية بعمر 14 ودخلت حالة صراع حتى عمر 28، لكن لحد ما تقبلت نفسي واكتشفت وجود ناس مثلي ونحن نشكل شريحة بالمجتمع. فقررت أدخل أول علاقة، فعشت قصة حب مع بنت قالت لي إنها مستقلة مادياً ومعنوياً عن ذويها، وأن بإمكاننا أن نعمل معاً حتى نتمكن من العيش سوياً أو السفر. فوجئت بعد أن انقطاع الاتصال معها بأنها خطبت لشخص من أقاربها، فأصابتني صدمة نفسية. حاولت البقاء معها وحثها على أن ترى استعدادها النفسي لتقبل الزواج مع رجل. ثم بعد الصراع مع نفسي أدى بي إلى مراجعة طبيب نفسي. تحدثت له عن حالتي، فكان جوابه أنه يريد أن يأخذني لشقة فيها بنات ويرانا نمارس الجنس معا. أعطاني مجموعة كبيرة من المهدئات سببت لي ارتفاع ضغط وخفقان، فقررت أن أخفف المعاناة عن نفسي وأترك حبيبتي لخطيبها ومصيرها. فكانت المفاجأة الكبيرة أنها قامت بتهديدي وفضح أمري ونشر صوري الحقيقية وحسابي الوهمي الذي عملته للتواصل مع المثليات إن تركتها، وهو ما قد يؤدي لقتلي. أحببت بنت أخرى مثلية عراقية تعيش في أمريكا، أظهرت استعدادها لمساندتي قبل أن يقرر والدي أن علي أن أتزوج، وتقدم لي شخص من معارفه وميسور الحال، فدخلت بمشاكل وصراعات لأجل الموافقة، لكن ذلك لم يحدث. كما أن البنت قررت تركي بعد أن اكتشفت أمها علاقتنا معا. وهذا هو حال النساء الكويريات في بلد مثل العراق: خوف دائم، ضغوطات من الأهل بالزواج، عدم الاستقرار في العلاقة معينة بسبب تدخلات الأهل والمجتمع والخوف. وكل ما أريده هو أن أكون مع شريكة حياة، أكون أسرة ويكون لدي أطفال. هذه قصتي، وهناك عشرات القصص المتشابهة. والخوف اليوم أن تكون نهايتي بالتزوج من رجل، وأن أجرب اغتصاب الزوجية.
Well, we thank Naira for her participation in the study and also with this audio that she sent us talking about her story and giving us a glimpse about the life of a queer woman in Iraq. The study was not the easiest job that OutRight did with IraQueer. I would like to call my colleague, Amy Bishop, Senior Research Advisor at OutRight, to talk about the challenges that face us during the process. Yvonne, can you allow Amy to talk?
Oh, sorry, I'm seeing Neela, but I don't know which one it is. Let me just unmute Neela on both.
Okay.
Oh, there goes Ami.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Thanks.
We can see another name on the screen, but this is Amy Bishop. So
It is indeed. Thank you. Yeah, just briefly. I mean, as I think is very obvious from Nato, the woman who just spoke, the context is extremely difficult, and I think it's important to consider in general the context of women's rights in Iraq, and then within that, imagine the challenges of safely reaching queer women and ensuring that they feel comfortable and safe to share their stories. So that really was the biggest challenge, is ensuring that they could be safe and secure in telling their stories. Most are not. Just a few of those we spoke to, that Naziha and IraQueer spoke to, were actually out to their families. Most are not, and really there's a great deal of risk associated with them being found out, including expulsion from their family or even worse. And so this made it really challenging to find women willing to speak. And also we found it difficult to reach some of the ethnic minority women, like Yazidi women. We unfortunately did not reach intersex people, and also people more in rural areas, and older women. These are all sort of categories of women that were a bit harder to reach. And then of course you have to lay in COVID in all of this, which really hampered the ability to have more of a kind of in-person connection on the ground. So these challenges were definitely present, but I still think that we're extremely grateful to the 16 women who were able to speak, to Naziha and IraQueer teams, and we really honor the information that they provided. Thanks.
thank you, Amy. It was a challenge to put this study together. OutRight and IraQueer worked together to conduct these interviews, and then bringing out the outcome out of these interviews and putting them together was not the easiest due to the circumstances that Ami just talked about. I have a question for you, Amir. We all know that the situation of LGBTQ in Iraq is difficult, and the study reveals some of the challenges that face LBTQ women. What is your opinion? What is, in your opinion, could be done, at least in the first stages, to protect these women?
Honestly, I think the main thing is making sure that there is representation throughout the human rights movement, through talking to many of those women, and even before through working with many of them in different contexts. One thing that's clear is that even the women's rights movement or the human rights movement in general doesn't always take an intersectional approach where they recognize that people have multiple identities that intersect, that impact their experiences in life. And that includes women who obviously face a lot of discrimination because they are women, but they also face an additional level of discrimination because of their queer identity. So making sure that organizations are thinking about this actively, not only reactively. One of the things that was hard for us as an organization in the beginning is really try to find and especially sustain queer women colleagues. Today, we're very grateful to have 4 queer women on sitting on the organization's board, and people who are contributing to the work that we're doing. So there are a lot of very powerful individuals who are empowered to contribute meaningfully to the movement. We just need to take an active decision and take actions to actually include these individuals in the decision-making process and planning the activities that we're doing. Because in an ideal world, the government would be providing all kinds of protections for people to participate in these fields. But sadly, the Iraqi government isn't recognizing all kinds of rights, let alone the rights of queer women. So it has to start, in my opinion, from the human rights movement, both locally and internationally.
Thank you, Amir. We are welcoming any questions from the audience. If you have any, the report will be on our website and IraQueer website starting today in Arabic and in English. We would like also to thank Gala for supporting this report with their illustration that really reflect the nature of what LGBTQ women face in Iraq. Do I see any questions? Yvonne, can you allow me to share my screen? I want to actually go through the report. I can't see that I can do the...
You should be able to share your screen. Please try.
I'm trying, it just doesn't work. Yeah. Anyways, the report will be, because I would like to share actually how does it look with the audience. It's so beautiful, in my opinion, at least. Okay, we have a question. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the name correctly. It's Seher Ali. What were the steps taken by IraQueer to make sure to create an inclusive environment for queer women? What were the challenges and difficulties? Question for you, Amir.
Absolutely. I think the main thing I want to start with is that this will not be a problem that IraQueer alone can address. But as an organization, the best we can do is to try our best. And as an organization, what we've been trying to do is to, as I said, include as many identities that represent our community as possible in the decision-making process of the organization. Another thing we've been trying to do is to provide a small amount of funding for new initiatives, and at least 2 of the ones we've funded in the last year or so have been to support queer women who started their own online platform to share art that addresses gender identity and sexuality, and to share a series of videos where trans individuals talk about their mental health, which again hasn't been done before. We try to talk about queer women identities and experiences in the radio program that we do monthly. We try to, obviously this report, I think, is again a massive success for the queer movement in general, not only IraQueer. Actually, it's a massive success for the queer women movement, who have been able to speak so courageously to Naziha and other colleagues at IraQueer and OutRight, when, again, I think about less than 10 years ago, we were barely able to speak to any queer individual, let alone a queer woman. That being said, I think one of the most important things we can do as a movement is to make sure that we are not only making space for queer women to join, but also actively having them join our own organizations and be a part of the decision-making process. Because, again, I feel very proud to be a part of this panel, but also very uncomfortable because I wish we could have queer women speak instead of me speaking. But we need to continue working until we reach a point where we have more queer women feel safe enough for them to be speaking publicly. And I think that's a collective responsibility.
Totally agree. Thank you, Amir, for answering this question. And I agree with the points that you brought out while doing the interviews with the women who participated in this study. There were a lot of challenges, a lot of fear that you can, that's actually part of why we have few women participated in this study, and also why we couldn't reach some categories in the society, older women from certain minorities, from certain backgrounds, but we are actually grateful for what we got, or for the women who participated in this study. Yvonne will help me share the study so we can actually go through it together, or you can actually with the audience we can see how does it look like, and share some of the content. So one of the actually somebody asked about the province that we interviewed people from. So I have Duhok, Erbil, Kirkuk, Slimania, Baghdad, Babylon, and Basra. So these are the places where the women were from when we talked with them. And some of the findings that we came to was like the one of the biggest titles, let's say, it's the fear is constant and safe spaces are few. Something that most of the women that we interviewed mentioned and highlight when we were talking to them. Also, they were talking about how women in general are marginalized and LBTQ women are even invisible. One of the quotes said, in official circles in parliament, the women have power, arms, wealth, but they are always underestimated, and they will always be exposed to rumors about their honor and about their personal lives and families. The most dangerous place for women is civil society in Iraq. All women are targeted. One of our one of the women who participated in the study gave us this quote. So it just highlights how women in public spheres and also in political life, what they are facing. Another finding was that the humanitarian organizations do not address the needs of LGBTQ women LGBTQ people in general and queer women in particular. There is no any programs or any initiatives that's directed to LGBTQ women. Socioeconomic status, class affects the safety and political participation. We also found that very obviously during the study, because women who are coming from certain class and from certain background are a little bit more safe than other who comes from lower class or another background when it comes to education or religious backgrounds even. One of the common desires is basic safety and security. Women wants to feel safe, secure, and loved. The women that we interviewed in this study. Also, the challenges for trans women are really magnified. They don't have any support. They don't have any kind of access to health care or to even to psychological support, or even a community. At least the women that we interviewed in this study, they were saying that there is a lack of support to their existence and to their identity. And the conflict that Iraq has been facing in the last almost 20 years, or even more than that, has always slowed the progress for women, including queer women, and added to their psychological struggle and to their existence. So there were, of course, IraQueer and OutRight put together recommendations for what could be done to make their life better and to make it more safe and include them into the society more. So we have many of these recommendations. I will just go back to the questions to check if there is any questions that we could actually answer. I'm sorry, share the link of the study you shared in the screen here. Yeah, we will share the link in a few. Just give us some time, Sana, and also it will be sent around, and as I said, you will find it on the website. There is another question for you, Amir. Would you say that the situation for LGBT or LBT plus women specifically is stable or deteriorating? Iraqi officials did not have comments on the murder case of Dasuki Azad, while they did give a statement about violence against women generally. What are your thoughts, and why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think, it's not a black and white answer. I don't think the situation is becoming worse or becoming better. In one sense, it's definitely becoming worse because there is a lot more pushback from the government as the movement is growing. And the fact that they didn't make any comments about Doski's murder is just a reflection that they do not even recognize that we exist as a community, as queer people. In fact, the only time the Iraqi government has recognized the right to life for all citizens, regardless of their sexual orientation, was in front of the United Nations in 2020. And they've never echoed that statement internally. They've never told the public in Iraq that the right to life should be guaranteed for all people, regardless of their sexual orientation. That being said, even though I think as a community, we're continuing to face a lot of violence and a lot of attacks, at the same time, I see a lot of progress. Before IraQueer, there was literally no LGBT plus organization. Now there are small groups starting here and there doing all kinds of different things. There are a lot of brilliant young activists, many of whom are queer women who are contributing to the movement, again, sadly, not in a public way because the cost would be a lot greater, but very powerfully contributing to the movement. Many of them, because they are having such important and powerful impact on the community, are facing backlash from local governments who are either trying to detain them or force them to stop the work that they're doing. But at the same time, they continue pushing back, despite the fact that they're 20 to 25-year-olds who, in theory, have a lot to lose because the government is so discriminatory, and the government is so, they have no red lines that they wouldn't cross, as we have seen in all kinds of contexts. So I'm very proud of the where the movement is going. That being said, the violence that we're facing is very real and sadly is not diminishing.
Thank you, Amir. There is a question in the audience: how can trans women find peace in the Middle East? It's very a broad question. Ami, would you like to answer? Ami?
Yeah, can you repeat the question? Can you hear me?
How can trans women find peace in Middle East?
You're asking me this question. I think that Amir's probably better suited to respond, but based on the research that we found, I think certainly the issue of lack of being able to safely transition, to have to perhaps go to other countries and return, not have your gender legally recognized. All of these are hugely important issues. So there's the sort of the legal and policy side of it, which frankly probably is not going to change soon. But then there is just simply the day-to-day support to people to be able to live in the bodies in the way that they wish. So, to the extent that there is a way for them to find support with each other or with, one would hope that some of the women's organizations, women rights organization would also embrace them and their needs and their cause. One would hope that could be possible, but I don't know, Amir, maybe you want to comment further on that.
Please, Amir, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, like you, Ami, I wish there were trans women who would respond instead of you and me. But at the same time, I think really the biggest obstacle to the queer movement in general, not only the trans movement, is the fact that our right to life is really violated all the time, and there is no accountability for those who are killing us. I'm going to tie it back to what one of the questions highlighted: the murder of Doski, who was killed by her brother. Even now, like the person who has a question said, the government has not made any comments. The person, her brother who killed her, has not been detained. And these murders, that murder was not the first that took place. It will not be the last that will take place. And the government continues to deny that we exist, let alone that we're being killed. So I think the main thing that I really urge the civil society, the queer movement in general, local and international governments to do is to make sure that the right to life is being upheld, it's being protected, because regardless of what you believe in, whether you're religious or not, whether you're traditional, more conservative or more liberal, I hope that we at least agree that the right to life is something that we should all equally enjoy, and it should be protected. Because when, whether it's trans people or other groups, if they are afraid that they will lose their lives if they do anything, that means that they can't do anything, because it's the most important right. If people are not alive, they're not going to be able to do anything. So putting pressure on the Iraqi government to make sure that those who are killing queer people, those who are killing trans people, are held accountable for those crimes is crucial. And it's not something that we're going to even negotiate. There's no negotiations about the right to life.
Yeah, I agree with you, Amir. Thank you for pointing this out. And I think just in general, to answer that question is to be recognized and to be just recognized as a human being that has equal rights to everybody else in the country or in the region. That will make them find peace and live together with everybody else. And I think the same person is commenting again, sorry to interrupt, but we have been seeking help from organizations since forever, and we haven't seen general or personal help other than mental help. And for the longest run, we feel lifeless. I'm really sorry that you feel like this, and I don't know what to comment, honestly. Amir, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I mean, there's no satisfying answer to address this. I think two things come to mind. One, it's a general frustration from the queer movement that there isn't much progress that is noticeable. I want to remind people that the fact that we're having this conversation, the fact that we have this report, the fact that we have organizations like IraQueer and others with queer women sitting on the board and contributing within the team is progress, but it's definitely not the progress that would actually immediately protect you. So a part of it is just because we're operating in such a complicated and violent environment, the progress that we can make is really limited by the reality that we have. And again, because our right to life is being attacked all the time, that will slow down the movement even more. The second thing I want to say is really to encourage people who are not seeing progress being done in the way that they want to see, is to join the movement. Everyone in the movement, everyone that I've spoken to throughout my career of more than 10 years, are really some of the most powerful people I know. The fact that they, go about living their days every day, despite the fact that they see so much violence against people like them. Some of them even have seen their loved ones being killed, and they continue to live and try to express themselves, shows how powerful each individual is. So I encourage those people to invest that power in organizations, whether like IraQueer or even starting your own thing. There is a movement happening, and the more people join, the more powerful we will be, and the faster the progress will be. And at the same time, the more difficult it will be for people who are opposing us to continue opposing us, because we're becoming a larger movement.
Thank you, Amir. I would like to say to the person who is asking the question, Harley Love, is we want you to feel that of course you are recognized, and we are trying our best to help and to provide whatever you are asking for. I mean, I don't know, because it's a general talk. So also this study is focusing on these needs and putting them into points, what should be done and what should or government do, what should development organizations do, and what should civil society do. And I just want you to know that you are recognized and you are loved, and we would be there for you if you need us. And I'm sorry that you feel not recognized and your needs haven't been met. There is another question where it's for OutRight and IraQueer, where either OutRight or IraQueer able to identify important decision makers and government actors who are interested in assisting the LGBTQ plus movement. In my position, we didn't reach them to see if they wanna support the movement or interested in supporting the movement, but I don't think it's actually something especially if the question is about Iraq, it's something that any of the decision makers or the government actors will do at the moment. I will handle the mic to Amir to also give his remarks toward this.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not a very popular position to take in Iraq. That being said, I think in the last few years, we've been able to identify maybe 3 to 5 people who are willing to support queer people from behind the, not publicly. They would do it anonymously. So, for example, I think it was last year where 9 people were detained because they were suspected to be gay men, and we worked with a politician who helped us release them. We have also been working with the same politician and trying to provide protection to certain activists. In other parts of the country, we've been working with one religious leader who is gay himself, actually, to try and push for some kind of change in the narrative that's being shared by religious leaders that has mainly been the driver of violence against LGBT plus people. We're identifying younger politicians who are engaging in politics to try and work with them in a way to show that even if they're not specifically pro-LGBT plus rights, they can at least as neutrals help protect more LGBT plus people. But again, sadly, not even one person is publicly supporting LGBT plus people in a systematic way. Some of them make maybe one statement here and there, but generally the political support for queer people in a public way is still not there. And a part of it is understandable because they will face physical violence, and some of them are forced to only support us anonymously, basically. But a part of it is also heartbreaking for people to continue seeing politicians only talking in more hateful and violent ways against LGBT plus people and not seeing politicians who would do the opposite. But we hope that those that we've been working with will be moving towards a direction where they will be able to contribute to these movements publicly.
Thank you, Amir. Maria, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also important to not see any country as sort of isolated completely. Countries influence each other as well. And so it's important that our advocacy also targets the other governments with stakes in Iraq. And what we have found at OutRight in many situations is that when it's a topic like this that is so sensitive, the governments who in many other situations are champions, if you will, of LGBTQ rights, are afraid to bring it up or afraid to say anything because it's so difficult and it's so challenging. And so holding those governments to account as well is an important piece of it, and also helping government officials understand the framing. Like Amir has been saying, like the right to life, that's non-negotiable. But if you don't say that the right to life also includes LGBT people, then it's easy for some to sort of conveniently forget about that. And the humanitarian organizations as well, it's like, okay, the disaster or the situation, it's bad for everyone. We're not going to do anything specific for LGBT people, but we'll be helping everyone. Well, if that's your approach, you may not reach everyone because people may not be able to go there. They may not feel free to reveal what issues they specifically have. So to the question in the chat about sort of, what's the purpose of the research? The purpose of the research is always to improve our ability to do advocacy with the decision makers and people in power so that things can change. It's not going to change immediately, we know that, but working long-term to really try to change the narrative, that's the whole purpose of the data collection.
That's right, Maria. And like the question came about the purpose, and I can actually go through the list of the purpose that we listed in the research. We wanted to identify some of the current concerns, risks, and needs of LGBTQ women in Iraq, and we wanted to assess the extent to which LGBTQ women and their needs are represented within the Iraq's women's rights movement and the public sphere and policymaking. Also, we wanted to describe how COVID-19 maybe affected the conditions for LGBTQ women in Iraq. We also wanted to assess the extent to which humanitarian and development efforts are meeting the needs of LGBTQ women during the current post-conflict, post-Islamic State period in the country. Wanted to identify gaps and opportunities in Iraq legal framework for ensuring protection of LGBTQ Iraqi women, and of course, next to what Maria just mentioned, of it's a database, and it's a base actually to build on it advocacy and moving forward, working for the community. As also Maria said, it doesn't take 1 day or 1 month or even 1 year to develop that. It takes long time, but we needed a base to start with. There are also, there were a question, are we going to submit the recommendations to all the decision makers? Maria, would you like to answer that?
Yes, I mean, we're definitely making recommendations in the various spaces, including speaking directly with governments whenever we see an opportunity at the United Nations or with other institutions. We will use this report and our knowledge to bring that to the attention of decision makers.
Thank you, Maria. And I think it's also answering the other question about if we're going to advocate for, like, with the outcome of this report to the governmental level in the US and in the EU, and put pressure on the Iraqi government. So there will be this information or recommendations and outcomes of this report will be used in any opportunity that OutRight see it suitable to reveal the situation in Iraq and to put pressure on the Iraqi government to change the situation and to improve it for LGBTQ women and for the LGBT community in general. I can see that there is more questions. My question is, are there any plans to start working with the queer community directly other than responding to immediate needs? I'm talking about capacity building and a group to, and creating of a safe space network of queer individuals and a group to work together to build sense of community and solidarity. I think we started to do that already, like with the work that the Canadian government supported with, we did some capacity building work, and this research comes also under the same project. Amir, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I think I'll take the opportunity to thank you, Naziha, to thank other colleagues at OutRight and colleagues at IraQueer, because proudly we've been doing a lot of trainings targeting activists and queer individuals in general who have been receiving training on law, on gender and sexuality, on advocacy, security, and that I think we spent a whole year where those trainings were provided for at least 15 to 20 people in partnership with OutRight. And on the side, as an organization, IraQueer has been doing multiple other trainings for journalists, for some police officers in the gender violence department in the Kurdish region, for a few religious leaders. So we are doing a lot of training. Sadly, like a lot of the work that we do, these things are not things that we will be talking about in detail because we can't put the people who are giving those trainings and receiving those trainings in danger. But there are amazing efforts being led by both IraQueer and OutRight and other organizations too, who are doing very important work.
Thank you, Amir. And there is one more question to you about what is your advice for young LGBT plus activists in the operation, such as sensitive environment?
I think first, be mindful that I haven't been allowed to be back in Iraq since 2014 or 15. So I can't give you the best advice because I haven't lived in that full reality since then. So my first advice is really to make sure that you are safe, that whatever you do, you take care of your physical and mental health, and that you make decisions in a smart way that reflect the reality around you. Because sometimes we can say, go out and talk about these issues and be public, but that can have great cost that will actually could lead to you not being able to contribute to the movement long term. I've made the decision to be public, and I've paid the cost in a way where I'm not allowed to go back to Iraq. But there are people who are not public, who are doing brilliant work. Many of the people that I've highlighted who started their own initiatives, doing things online, reaching out to communities that normally it's really hard to reach out to. The second thing that I want to highlight is that realizing that you're not alone and that you do not have to do it alone. If you're here, it means that you know at least about IraQueer and OutRight, and we can connect you to even more organizations. We can help provide you with trainings that you need. We can connect you to groups and make sure that you are doing the advocacy that you believe in a way that aligns with your values and the goals that you want to see. So it can be really difficult to think as a young activist that I can't change anything in Iraq because things are so difficult, but realizing that you're not alone and that there are a lot of individuals and organizations who would love to support you will hopefully make it easier for you to do the work that you believe in.
Thank you, Amir. There's a question for you, Maria. How does OutRight plan to support the movement in Iraq? What are the next steps for OutRight in Iraq?
So first, let me say that we've been cooperating with IraQueer for many years, and we continue to do so and looking for opportunities to work together. And that is always our approach, to work with the organizations and activists in country. So that is a continued relationship. And of course, I mean, this report is just one piece of it. I also want to plug a new global program that OutRight has that we're launching actually publicly next week, which is called LBTQ Connect, which is a program for LGBTQ women and those who identify under that umbrella, where we're going to have a virtual mentorship pairing 100 mentees and 100 mentors. And of course, we're hoping to see, participation from Iraq and the region in that mentorship program as well. So that's one other piece of sort of helping bring the capacity up of the future generations of leaders.
Yeah, thank you, Maria.
I'll also just quickly comment on something Maria said. I've had the privilege of working with Maria and other colleagues at OutRight for many years now. I think one of the most important reasons for why the partnership between the two organizations has been so successful is that OutRight really relies on local partners to identify these needs. So my advice to anyone who is asking what is OutRight's plan is to think about what's needed and you tell outright. I think that has been the approach we've been doing. So the report, when we started thinking about what needs to be done, or the trainings, are really largely came from the local movement itself, who said, we don't have such information. We need such information. We do not have such skills or capacity building. We need these skills. So if you have ideas, come to both organizations, and that will be the approach that we will be taking. None of the things that we've been doing as a part of our partnerships are coming from vacuum, or just because we think it's a good idea. If it's not rooted in what the movement needs, then it's not a good idea, in our opinion, if I may speak on your behalf too, Maria.
Well, I think we reached actually the end of this session or this event, and there were many questions that were, I'm grateful for the people who are asking these questions. It gave a whole idea about the report and about the study that we did, and also gave actually a background about the situation in Iraq, and even deeper into OutRight and IraQueer work in the LGBTQ sphere, either in Iraq or outside. Thank you all for attending today. And the report, as I said, will be available on OutRight website and IraQueer website in Arabic and English for public. Thank you for joining us today, and have a great one. Thank you, Amir. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Ami, for joining us today. And of course, thank you, Yvonne, for supporting this session technically.